we are coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr MABROuk. Dua Muhammad is at the control. We are here with you for the next hour from the world of info from FM 95.4. And today in the world of info, we have the world of books. And we are presenting two really interesting books that deal with two very important characters in the history of Egypt. The first book is The Flowers of Egypt, Imam al-Shafi'i by Samah al-Zahar. And the second book is the role of Kulthum, famous singer, in collecting donations for the Egyptian army after 1967 by Karim Gamal. Well, two very important people who lived in Egypt who had a great love and great admiration of the country that they lived in and they died in. So let's start right away with the Imam al-Shafi'i. Imam al-Shafi'i is one of the most important Islamic theologians of Islam. He was born in the year 150 after Hijrah, and that is equivalent almost into the 8th century. His great-grandfather is Hashim, who is the same grandfather of Prophet Muhammad. So he is like a distant cousin of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. He was born in Gaza in the year 150 and died in Egypt in the year 204. During these 54 years that he lived, he has taken a very important role and share in the understanding of the Islam and writing the real important writings about leading the pathway for the proper understanding of Islam. All through his life, Imam al-Shafi'i was a very modest and a moderate man. And he has carried in his heart the Quran, which he has learned as early as 7 years of age by heart. And his mother, who was from a very famous Yemeni tribe and living in Gaza, where she met his father. Unfortunately, his father died in a very young age. And so it was up to the mother to take care of him. She decided when he was almost 7 or 8 years to take him to Mecca because he is belonging to Bani Hashim, the most distinguished tribe of the Arabs living in Mecca. And they are very proud people, and especially they are proud by being related to the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. So she wanted her son to be leading a pious life and a life of science and understanding. She took him to Mecca and tried to teach him. The first, after memorizing the whole Quran, she sent him to study in the Arabic language at a very important tribe called Hazil, which was famous for being very eloquent in the use of Arabic language and very understanding and in the poetry and all anything that is related to the Arabic language. During his work and study in Huzail, he met Muslim ibn Zingi. Muslim ibn Zingi was a famous sheikh in Mecca, and he was one of the leading scientists, Islamic scientists and theologians at that time in Mecca. Told him who you are, and he said, I am related to Bani Hashim. He said, what are you doing? He said, I'm studying the Arabic language. He said, I think that you should get enough with this Arabic language studying and start working for yourself in reading and understanding the theology of Islam. So he started teaching him the Islam rules and the Islamic ideas of how to be a good Muslim, and he became very much interested in understanding the core of Islam. As he was doing that, he knew that the Imam Malik, the famous Islam Muslim theologist, was living in Medina and has his own school there of theology. So Muslim ibn Zingi told him, you can go and learn from Imam Malik. So he went at the age of 20 to Imam Malik and started studying and taking up his important school of Islamic thought. And Imam Malik admired Imam al-Shafi'i very much, and he stayed with him until the death of Imam Malik at the year 179. In the year 179, it was well known at that time that Shafi'i was a good man, a pious man, and a man of good deeds. So one of the authoritarian people at that time has suggested that they can use Imam Shafi'i for being a good uh, gentleman who is taking a role, high administrative role in Yemen. And he went there. The governor of Yemen did not like Imam Shafi'i that much because he thought that Imam Shafi'i was being a very rigid and a just person. So he would not allow any misconduct as regards of the money things and things like that. So he decided to make a sort of a false accusation of Imam Shafi'i that he is not a good man and that he is going to make a conspiracy against the Abbasid dynasty, wanting to bring the Alawis, the people who are with the Alawi side, to become interested and to become in governing. So Harun al-Rashid, who was the Grand Khalif at that time in Baghdad, told this Yemeni governor, all right, send me this Shafi'i and send me the 10 people who are causing troubles over there. So the 10 people who were not related whatsoever to the Imam Shafi'i were summoned up together with the Imam Shafi'i. And Imam Shafi'i, once he reached there, Harun al-Rashid had a lot of evidence against these 10 people, so he decided to put them in jail and send them to death. And then, before he making any condemning of Imam Shafi'i approached him and told him, before you give any wrong condemnation of me for death, let us first of all discuss some theological facts. First of all, I am from Bani Hashim, and this is the same tribe that you belong to. So for me, you are like a cousin. While the Alawis are distant cousins, you are quite a near cousin to me. So you should know by now that I am one of your employees, and I'm not going to betray you. So Harun al-Rashid got stunned from him and said to him, how much do you know about Quran? He said, I know Quran and I have memorized it since I was 7. Did you study the Quran and theology? He said, yes, I studied theology and I know what's right and what's wrong, and I've been the student of Imam Malik. So he told him, do you know who's who? He said, yes, I know who is good and who is bad, who is coming from a decent family and who is coming from a bad family. So he told him, all right, give me a piece of advice. So being a just and a brave and a pious person, he gave Harun al-Rashid an advice not to be conceited and not to have the idea that he owns everything in the world, and to remember always that he is mortal. And at that point, Harun al-Rashid started crying and shedding tears, because he knew then that Imam Shafi'i was a real pious, brave, and scientist. And so he kept him in his entourage and wanted him to stay with him. During this period of stay, Imam Shafi'i went on to try to trace, to teach, or to learn the teachings of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa was an important theologist, but unfortunately he was living in Iraq, and unfortunately he died beforehand. He died in the year 150, so Shafi'i didn't see him, and therefore he went to one of his students who knew quite well what are the teachings of Abu Hanifa. And there he started learning everything about Abu Hanifa. At that point of time, Shafi'i has taken up the theology of al-Madinah from Malik. And the theology of Malik was a sort of writings that have been taken directly from the Prophet and from people who have seen the Prophet, that reached Imam Malik, and therefore they were not rigid, but they were trying to stick by the books. While Abu Hanifa always had the idea of using your mind to interpret the things that are not that clear in Islam. So Shafi'i now became a student of both schools. So he's using his mind in the proper points when it is not really clear what are the rules, and at the same time he is taking the rules that have been fulfilled rigidly. So by this point of view, he has made his own school of Islamic thought, and this is what makes Shafi'i a very important gentleman, because of his understanding of Islam. He has written a book at that time in Iraq called Al-Risala, or the Message, and he has written in it all his experience, whether this was from the Medina, from Malik, or from the student of Abu Hanifa. At that time, in the year 198, Harun al-Rashid unfortunately died, and his son al-Ma'mun became the Khalif. Although he liked Imam al-Shafi'i, but it was very clear that al-Ma'mun didn't very much favor the Arabs, and he decided to make the Persian people more in his entourage. And Imam al-Shafi'i, being a real proud Arab from the Hashemite tribe, was not that very much happy. So in spite of the fact that Ma'mun has offered him a decent job as one of the scholars and the important scientists of Islam, he decided to leave, and he went to Egypt. He arrived to Egypt in 198, and it was famous about Shafi'i that he has written a lot of poetry. And when he has written this poetry, he said, I'm coming to Egypt. I don't know where I'm going to. Am I going to fame, or am I going to death? Well, actually, he went to both. Because once he reached there, he started learning also from the teachings and the classical teachings of Al-Lays ibn Sa'd. Al-Lays ibn Sa'd is a very important Muslim theologist, who was an Egyptian Muslim theologist, who has had his own school of Islamic thought. So now, by this grand exposure, Shafi'i was exposed not only to Malik's, but to Abu Hanifa and to the Lays. And the three of them are different schools, three schools of thought. And therefore, he started revising all his teachings and all what he has written in his book, Al-Risala, and he has written his final book of Islamic theology called Al-Umm, or the Mother. And yes, this is a very important point of view of Imam Shafi'i, because at that time, knowing the Arabic language, the Quran, and the Hadith, he started his own school in this area that later on became his home, which was in one of the on the outskirts of Al-Fustat, the capital of Egypt. He would wake up in the early morning after the dawn prayers, and he started giving a class of 2 hours about Quran. And then the second class will be about Hadith, and these are the certified, proved words of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And then the third 2 hours will be dedicated to Arab classical teaching. And therefore, he has had a lot of students who started writing after him and about his food for thought. And so this man became he was lucky to have a lot of students, and lucky that his book survived. While the Lays ibn Sa'd, a lot of his students unfortunately didn't write after him his thoughts. It was only Shafi'i who had his thoughts and put them together and combined them with the thoughts of Malik and the thoughts of Abu Hanifa, and therefore has led to this beautiful book, The Mother. He loved Egyptians, and Egyptians really loved him. And the myth goes on until his death, unfortunately, in the year 204 after Hijrah. That is equivalent to 820, that is in the early 9th century. Now, Imam Shafi'i had a very important place in the hearts of Egyptians. And in spite of the fact that when the Fatimids came and they were Shiite, the love and the respect to the thoughts and the philosophy of Imam Shafi'i survived the Fatimids. And when Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi came to Egypt, and Salah ad-Din was known to be very much impressed with Al-Imam Shafi'i, that he, in his early teens, until his age of 18, he was very much interested to become a Muslim theologist and studying Islam and to become like Imam Shafi'i. So for him, Imam al-Shafi'i was a very important person. Once Salah ad-Din became the ruler of Egypt, he decided to take care of the cemetery or the mausoleum of Imam al-Shafi'i and build beside it a school for the Shafi'i theology, and it's called the Salahi school, or the Madrasa al-Salahi. And it's this site that has been put on together and demolished and resurrected many times. But after Salah ad-Din death, King al-Adil, his brother, became the ruler of Egypt, and his son King Kamil was very impressed as his uncle with Imam al-Shafi'i, that he decided to build him his beautiful mausoleum, which still exists like till now, and it has the same architectural purview of the dome of the rock in Jerusalem. And it is this beautiful dome that has been always taking very good care of the consecutive rulers of Egypt. We see Sultan Kamil made this dome, and then later on we see Qaitbay has done some refurbishing of this dome, and then followed by Ali Bey al-Kibir, the famous gentleman, and Abdurrahman Qutb, and even Khedive Tawfiq. Khedive Tawfiq has built in the place of the school and the other mosques that were built on this site, the new mosque, which is the mosque of Imam al-Shafi'i, that is adherent to the dome. And this is the beautiful mosque built in the year 1891 on the classical drawings and architecture of the late Mamluk, or what they call the Neo-Mamluk. Now, when we look at this special dome, we'll find that Imam al-Shafi'i is buried in under the dome, covered by a beautiful wooden kantuf, and this wooden kantuf was made by Salah ad-Din, instructed to be made by Salah ad-Din. Another gentleman is buried next to him, and this is Al-Hakam, and he was the man who owned this piece of land. And the King Kamil, Sultan Kamil, buried his mother near the grave of Imam al-Shafi'i, and one of his sons is also buried there. The idea of how close Imam al-Shafi'i is to the hearts of Egyptians, that a lot of Egyptians decided to build their mausoleums and their graves quite right next to Imam al-Shafi'i, so maybe they would have the blessings of him, and maybe they will have the part of the heaven that he is definitely going to be, including the royal family of Muhammad Ali, who have built their mausoleum just across about 3 or 4 meters away from the dome of Imam Shafi'i. And when we look on the dome, we'll find that it is covered with tin, and on top of the tin we see a small boat. And this boat is example, or giving us a symbol of the science of and the philosophy of Imam Shafi'i, who has taken the infidel with him on the boat and made them fidel and made them believers. So it's very important that in spite of all the domes have a crescent, the dome of Imam Shafi'i has a boat, which is the salvage of the people and the salvage of his followers. An interesting idea. And when we look on this mausoleum, and we find that a lot of people do visit Imam Shafi'i regularly to have blessings from his side. And this is so much interesting to see about Imam Shafi'i. When we go and see this, we'll definitely have an idea of his importance. But before we leave Imam Shafi'i and this beautiful book, we have to talk about his place in the hearts of Egyptians. Dr. Said Awais, the famous sociologist and a professor of sociology, has written a very beautiful research work about the letters that are sent to Imam Shafi'i. And these letters are demands that are sent by pious people and dropped into the window of the mausoleum of Imam Shafi'i. He said, or he claimed, that during this study time, which was in the early 70s of the last century, he said that the number of demands and letters dropped on the kantuf of Imam al-Shafi'i are exceeding the number of demands that reach the President of the Republic. And this shows how Egyptians are so much strong believers in the status of an Imam al-Shafi'i. And they say that if St. George is the saint of the UK and protector of the UK, it is said that Imam al-Shafi'i is the saint of the Egyptians and Egypt and the protector of Egypt. Whether this is true or not true, what's important to know is that Imam al-Shafi'i has a great role in the theology and Islamic theology. His school of philosophical Islamic thought is one of the most moderate, modest, and updated thoughts that really help us to understand how Islam teaches the people to become pious and peaceful and not causing any harm to any human being. Definitely a man of thought, definitely a man that deserves to be respected, and a man who lives until now and lives in the hearts of the Muslims from all over the world. A very nice book, Rayahin Masr Imam al-Shafi'i by Samih Zahar, and a man who deserves to be mentioned always with great respect, Al-Imam al-Shafi'i. Stay tuned to us, to the world of info, and after the break, we'll talk about it. So yes, you are still listening to the world of info, and today is the world of books. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad is still at the control, and today the second book is really a book of interest because it deals with another character that has been a very important lady in the hearts and the minds of the Egyptians. The most famous singer of the Arab world, a lady who has really affected the lives of the Egyptians, not just during her lifetime, which spanned almost more than 70 years, but also through her years after even her death, while her songs still live with us. And of course, by this I mean Kulthum. And this is a very nice book by Karim Gamal, and he's talking about role of Kulthum in the donations for the Egyptian army after 1967. And before we go into the details of this book, we'll talk more about Kulthum through a small or a short book that was written also by Karim Gamal about Kulthum herself. Who is Kulthum? A lady that has been born in the last 2 years of the 19th century. Some say it is maybe the year 1898 or maybe after that. Anyway, Kulthum was born in a small village in Mansoura or in the Qahliya. It's called Tamay Zahira. Her father was the imam of the mosque of this village, and he had his elder son Khalid, who was a young chap, and her father was making a living after, because the amount of money that he receives as the imam of the mosque is very small. So he used to go and do some short recitals in different places during Mawlids in nearby villages, where he give small songs that are talking about the love of the Prophet, and some Sufi songs. And he was teaching his son Khalid this. When he had his young daughter Kulthum, who her name is, he named her after the name of the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, claiming that he has seen in one of his dreams daughter of the Prophet Kulthum, who died young, came to him in his dream and told him, "You'll have a beautiful daughter who's going to change the world." So he decided to call her Kulthum on the sort of a being blessing by the name of the daughter of the Prophet. When Kulthum was born, he noticed as she get into 3 or 4 years of age that she has a beautiful voice, and she is always repeating the rhymes that he is teaching to his son Khalid regularly. And she goes and attend these recitals and starts singing with the chorus. So her father, Ibrahim, decided to take her with him in these recitals and small parties, and her voice became an important commodity on all these concerts that she was considered to be the main singer of the group of her father. As she went and got to improve her wordings, and she started singing the songs of a sheikh, Sufi sheikh called Abu al-Ala. And Abu al-Ala, who was a singer also of Sufi songs, listened to her once, and he said to her father, "You should take her to Cairo, where she can advance more in studying these different verses. And yes, I'm going to give her some of my songs, and she can use it and sing it." So from then on, she became more famous, and her songs are and her status as a singer became really very high. And it was in 31st of May 1934 that this is the official day of the opening of the Egyptian radio service. And they brought Kulthum to sing a song on air. And this was the start of the nemesis or the thesis or the great history of Kulthum, because on that particular day, Kulthum started singing every month a song or a recital where she present 3 of her songs or even 4. And every month, every Thursday, every first Thursday of the month, she will have her concert in Cairo, and people will go and listening, and usually the radio will transmit this song. And in the year 1936, Talat Basha Harb, the famous economist, decided to use the money of Bank Masr not just in building Egypt Air or building other companies, but he also decided to build a studio called Studio Masr or Studio Egypt. And one of his first projects was a musical film by the name of Widad, and that the famous starring at that time, the famous singer Kulthum in 1936. So the film was a great success, and Kulthum started gaining a good amount of money, and she has bought a piece of land in Zamalek, built on it a beautiful grand villa where she lived until her death in the 70s. And in this villa, she had her own training studio for and also a small guest house for a lot of her relatives who would come and visit her, because she was generous with her relatives. And one day in 1944, when King Farouk came inside one of the concerts, and this was in September 1944, and he attended the concert, and he was very happy with her that on that particular day he decided to give her the highest decoration of the Egyptian kingdom for ladies, and this is called the Nishan al-Kamal. And Kulthum from that day can be called Sahibat al-Asma, which is equivalent almost like a basha for ladies. And she started singing more with more advanced composers like Riyad al-Sumbati, who became one of her grand assistants in writing and giving a lot of beautiful music for her songs that culminated in the 60s, of course, with Al-Atlar. And in 1952, after the revolution, she was always known to be a great nationalist. That even during the 1948 war and after the siege of Al-Fallujah, when the heroes of Fallujah came, including one of them was Abdel Nasser, who was at that time a major, and she received all the heroes of Fallujah and in her house for tea and dessert, and she was introduced to Nasser on that day. Later on, when Nasser became president and the commander-in-chief of the revolution, he could not forget her nationalistic way of dealing with them, and he considered her to be one of the most important singers of Egypt. In 1954, even she had a problem with her thyroid gland, and Nasser decided to send her on the account of the government to the United States, where she received good treatment in the Navy hospital over there, and to come back with good without having to do the surgery, which could have affected her beautiful voice. So Kulthum started singing not just to the famous Riyad al-Sumbati and the famous Zakaria Ahmed of the old school, but also she started singing for the young uh, composers like Bali Hamdi with her first song Hubb in 1960, and with other songs of and continuing also the cooperation with Zakaria Ahmed before his death, and of course with Sumbati. And then in 1964, she received a sort of a presidential demand that she and Abdul Wahab should make a song together, and they did it. And it was 10 songs of Abdul Wahab. The start of it was Inta Umri by Ahmad Shafiq Kamil, the poet, in February 1964, to be followed by another 10 songs of Abdul Wahab. Kulthum really has excelled with her voice and her understanding of the language that she does. And definitely she brought the Arabs together. So this is a short resume of Kulthum, the singer. Kulthum, the intelligent person who has a very, as we can call, coloratura voice, the voice that is capable of transmitting and giving in a lot of information and a lot of voice that is definitely matching. But this beautiful voice is controlled by a very sharp mind. Her understanding of the Arabic language and her good taste of poems can really find what type of poems are good and what type of rhyme will the people will accept. Her good taste of the music will help her to guide the composers in the best tune. And she would even sit with the poets to discuss if they should change a word or two to go on with the beautiful rhyme so that it sticks to the minds of people. And her love of the new things has made her accept to have new conscripts in her band of composers who, like Bari Hamdi or Mogi, all of them can definitely have, and Said Mikawi later on, have had changed in her style and her music. So her music lived forever, her songs lived forever, but definitely her voice was mesmerizing. So this we are talking about the artist. But let's talk about the nationalist. And this is the subject of the book because Kulthum has been a great support of Egypt and support of the revolution and the support of Nasser. In 1956, she has made a lot of good nationalist songs, and one of them became the new national anthem, Wallah Zamani Silahi, written by Salah Jahid. Well, this is an important role as a sort of a nationalist, but at the times of trouble, in 1967, as Egypt was defeated and lost its Nakhtotor of Sinai, and a lot of Egyptian army got lost, and a lot of loss of equipment and souls. She was very much affected, entered into a bout of depression, and she came out of this depression with a strong will that she will survive, and she and Egypt will survive. And she decided to make a sort of a little guild of Egyptian women in support of the government, support of the Egyptian army. And these women, she started on, the first start was by asking the people to donate. And she would go on the radio and has short talks that have been broadcasted continuously, asking the Egyptians to donate part of their money for Egypt, give up their gold and to the Egyptian army. And this, she was very important and active in this idea that she really had her effect on bringing in a lot of important effect on the Egyptians who started donating their gold and their money to the Egyptian army. Then she started by saying, I'm going to do visits to different cities of Egypt where she is collecting money and giving in all the income that comes from these concerts to the Egyptian army. Not only this, she has even donated part of her jewels to the army and part of her collections of antiquities, and gave that gladly to the Egyptian army. And perhaps her visits, whether this was in Damanhur or in Alexandria or in Upper Egypt, all these concerts that were made where Egyptians would attend, pay heavily for their tickets, knowing that all this money will not go to the pocket of Kulthum, but will go to as a donation to the Egyptian army. When we talk about this critical period, we have to emphasize her role in the most important step, which is her concert in Paris. Before the defeat of 1967, she has met a French gentleman who was the owner of the Olympia Theatre, and this is one of the most important, prestigious theaters of music in Paris. And he asked her to come and to have a concert in Paris, two concerts that she would sing for the Arabs living in diaspora. She accepted, and it was planned to do it in October 1967. After the defeat, this guy thought that she would not come, but Kulthum accepted just on one condition: to postpone it till November for for obligations that she had to do, the concerts that she was going around the whole of Egypt. She accepted to do that, and she came to Paris. And the man in the beginning thought that no one would like to be attend, because everybody thought that Kulthum will not come to France, because there are a lot of Zionists living in France, and they thought that she would not come. So nobody was enthusiastic to buy tickets, not making sure that Kulthum is coming. But when Kulthum came to Le Bourget airport, and the people saw her on TV, suddenly all the tickets were sold. That the gentleman had even to put seats and chairs on the trottoirs and on the pathways of the theater, and all the tickets have disappeared, and the price had to increase. That he even allowed people to have standing tickets, because everyone wanted to see Kulthum. The most famous part of this show was the fact that Kulthum had her own announcer, Egyptian announcer, with her, who's going to introduce her. And so, as he introduced Kulthum in the first song of her songs, he said that Kulthum is singing here, and hopefully next year she will sing in Jerusalem when it will be liberated. So the guy who was the owner of the Olympia Theater came to Kulthum during the entr'acte, and he said to her, you shouldn't let your announcer or your anchorman talk in politics, and you shouldn't give mention of anything about Egypt or about the Egyptian army or the donation. So she looked at him in the eye. She understood French pretty well, but she didn't want to talk to him in French. So she said to her musicians, let's go home. And so the musicians grabbed their instruments and were going home. So the guy begged her, wept, and said to her, you do whatever you want. You say whatever you say, but please don't go. This was the type of Kulthum. When she was asked in one of the meetings that she had with Salwa Hijazi, the famous anchor lady, and asked her, what do you think of this time in France? You have donated about 14,000 sterling pounds, and you didn't take any penny from this, and you donated to Egypt. And she said, this is not enough. We should give more. This gives you an idea of her character. And then when asked what was the best thing that she has seen in Paris, she smiled back and said, the Egyptian obelisk in the Concorde Place. A very nationalist, a very enthusiastic person in Egypt, a lady who thought of Egypt as one of her causes of success. And therefore, not only she did these two concerts in Paris, she went to Morocco, she went to Sudan, she went to the Emirates, and she had concerts all over. And all these times she would donate all the money and all the gold chains and all these things, not for her own, but for the Egyptian army. The idea of how Kulthum has really shown us how a real nationalist should act, how a person should always consider himself or herself as an important pillar of advance of his country is definitely a very important role to be respected. Kulthum stayed in the hearts of the Egyptians. Her nationalist work, her decision to help her country in times of trouble, and her continuous will and strong will to support the government with paying this money and with donating all her efforts and work really shows how much Kulthum has done to Egypt. And as time flies and as she get a bit older, she went on persistence in doing these concerts. The death of Nasser has really broken her heart, but as Nasser died, she decided to go on and continue singing and donating money to the Egyptian army after the death of Nasser. It wasn't until she, unfortunately, in the year 1973, that her health failed her. So she could not make more songs. This was on the 4th of January 1973. She cannot make more concerts, but she stayed in touch with the Egyptians. She had her own projects of humanitarian help for people and had her desire to go on as a legacy helping people up till now. Still, Kulthum lives in the hearts of Egyptians. Still, Kulthum stays in our hearts and stays in our minds. And definitely, her role and her life is an example of nationalism and of art and of taste. Kulthum, the singer, and unfortunately, we were just celebrating 50 years of the anniversary of her death last February, but still she lives in our heart. Stay tuned to the World of Info and we come to you. So before we leave you with Kulthum, we have to talk about her further concerts that she made. The ones in Morocco, but really, and the ones in Tunisia that helped to return the friendly relations between Egypt and Tunisia. The ones in Sudan and in Kuwait, and her last trip abroad to go to Moscow to sing. And as she was starting to go to her concert, she received the hard news that President Nasser has passed away. So she decided to abort this trip and not to sing and go back to Nasser's funeral. Well, a real great lady by the name of Kulthum, an Egyptian lady who loved Egypt and felt it in her veins. Today were two books. The first book was about Imam al-Shafi'i, the man who has the grandest state in the hearts of Egyptians, a man who receives more letters and more demands than anyone else in Egypt, and the story of Kulthum, an Egyptian lady from Egypt who loved this country and lived in it and died in it with all her emotions tied to this country. So, with this, we come to the end of our program, and hopefully we'll see you at the same time, same station next week in Radio Cairo. Stay always tuned to Radio Cairo. This was the World of Info. Dr. Amr MABROUK was with you, and Dua Muhammad was ahead.